Hello, hello, hello. Today I'm talking with Mathias Verraes. We talked about a good design on paper versus a holistic approach, long term pessimism, and working with people.
I'm Ivanul from Who's Agile. My pronouns are he and him. Welcome to my channel. You see a lot of agilists around me on this screen. If you want to hear me interviewing, please click that subscribe button because these are the people that I've invited so far. If you think I'm missing people, let me know in the comments. And that like button, well, if you liked today's interview, don't forget to click it.
Hello, hello everyone, and hello, Mathias. That's, I think, how I should pronounce
Hey,
it in English.
yes, that's fine. I'm used to all variations, so it doesn't really matter to me anymore.
Many people here are, but I still prefer to ask it on camera because it might be important, and we might learn it in a different way. And if I go to the locations, I'm in Ghent, Europe, and actually I realized we've been talking English in the pre-recordings. We could have just switched to Dutch because you're actually, if I go, you're in Kortrijk, not that far away from me.
Yeah.
And we're recording at this moment. It's a little bit over 5 o'clock on in Ghent, and I guess it's the same time in Kortrijk as well.
Yes.
That's so, Matthias. For the few people that don't know you, could you introduce yourself a little bit before we jump into the questions?
Yeah. So my name is Mathias Verraes. I'm my background is actually in music. I have a master's in pop music production.
Wow.
But well, that's an answer to your
To
next.
already another question, but we'll talk about that in a minute.
But I did some programming as a kid, and I rolled into software by doing like little web projects for art projects I was involved in, and things like that. And I got into open source, and then that sort of led to starting my first company with a friend. And I've been in IT ever since. And nowadays I became a freelance consultant, focused mostly on domain modeling, software design, architecture. Um, that was sort of I started doing training and consulting around that. Um, Very sort of hesitant at first because people were asking, and I didn't see myself as someone who did that. But then I finished the project, and I said, okay, I'll give this a few months and see where it goes. And it's been probably almost 15 years.
It's a little bit longer than a few months.
Yeah. But then,
Estimations in computer science, it's always a problem.
well, and for a while, I was sort of telling myself, like, okay, I'm doing this well, when I moved from music to software, for a while, I was sort of telling myself, like, I'll do some programming for a few years, save some money, and go back to music, and that also didn't happen. So I've done this. I've done this twice. And nowadays, I have a small company called Artling. We do still the same thing, but with some more people now. So helping companies to do modeling, bridging between domain experts and the business on the one side, and then engineering and architecture on the other side. A lot of modeling, a lot of architecture, but also more on the strategy side. We call it design strategy in the sense of it's good to have a great design on paper, but are you actually going to make that happen, and what is needed for that? So that became a sort of very holistic approach where I do like these mapping sessions, very chaotic, where we sort of look at everything all the time. Like somebody says something about I don't like working on this system, so now we're mapping people's emotions about different aspects of it. We might be mapping culture and team structure and or team organization, business strategy, decision making, money flows. We put that all on the map and then use that to figure out how we can actually deliver better designs that work for the business. And then
So what I'm hearing is that for you at that level, when somebody says like, I don't like to work, that you consider that, hey, that's important data because
that's
it
data.
tells us
Yes.
something about
Yeah.
that.
And it's usually not I don't like to work, right? It's more like, I usually start with sort of whatever people I have in the room. If they're architects, and it's sort of system components. If they are product people, it's maybe, product capabilities or requirements or things like that. If it's, depending on the roles. But then I sort of invite them to talk about it, and they will say stuff like, yeah, that was supposed to be obsolete, but that still hasn't happened. Okay, let's put that on the map, right? Like all the components that were supposed to be obsolete, let's put that, or the expected life cycle, let's put that on the map. And you start seeing the sort of clustering of all these things. People don't like working on this. It's supposed to be, they're supposed to get rid of it. There's still too many like contracts. Maybe there's customer contracts. I put those on the map. Anything that sort of constrains things, or there's no money for that part of the system, and you start seeing sort of clusters of all these constraints and inhibitors, and then you start understanding better why the things they've tried don't work, because they've maybe addressed one aspect, like, oh, let's just throw money against this thing without understanding all the other things that prevent it from happening, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you want to get rid of it from a technical point of view, but that actually your biggest client is needing that. Yeah, probably that you don't want to get rid of that. So, but as a developer, if you're not careful, you don't know about that, or if people don't. Didn't work.
Yeah, and it's usually like a lot of these things happening in a complex environment, right? All of these things are sort of happening at the same time with many actors with different agendas, and I put the politics on the map, which is a bit more dangerous, but sometimes that's more of a private map internally that we use to understand our customers. But ideally, I put that in the open as well. And so,
that's really
I think of our company as a modeling company first, and we use modeling to solve mostly software-related problems, but well, it's never just a technical problem.
It's always a people problem, or at least people are involved in many of these things.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
a system problem, and it's
voilà, and all these things. Very interesting introduction already. I really like it because it's like you say, it maybe some of these conversations are chaotic, but at the same time we learn a lot, and it's a little
there's a
bit
lot
how
more
I think.
connections in the chaos. If you scope something, you've already made a design decision. If you said we're going to only focus on this thing, it's basically Conway's law, right? You've already made a design decision. I call that accidental design, where you're not aware that you are being a designer at this point, and designer in the broadest sense of the word, of course. Anyone who has.
Well, sometimes they are aware, but not everybody in the room is aware.
Exactly.
I see that sometimes the people who are facilitating are abusing their power to only focus on the stuff, and not everybody in the room realizes, oh, that's because you don't want us to go in a certain direction, which is typically the most interesting reason why we should go in that direction. But okay, that's a different kind of discussion. Okay, let's jump into that first question, and maybe you alluded already a bit, maybe we're going in another direction, I don't know. But what is something that people usually don't know about you, but has influenced you in who you are?
Well, I guess a lot of people already know now that I studied music, and it's sort of long enough ago that it's like maybe not really a part of my identity anymore. But as this is an agile podcast, there's like one thing I count this as my earliest encounter with agile. I was doing a lot of sort of well, as a musician, you just find some ways to make money, and one for me was, and I was mostly writing music, which is even worse, especially in the early 2000s when the whole industry collapsed and there was no money left. But I was writing.
The only money was that if you could play gigs, but of course you weren't because you were writing.
I was mostly writing, yes. But
did you get some kind of training in these kind of things, or?
So the training I got was it was called pop music production. It was in the Royal Conservatory, so we had like proper music education. But the things that were very different was that, well, first of all, it was pop music, which was very new in Ghent. Before they had only classical music and jazz music. So we were sort of it was the very first year it existed, and we were the ugly ducklings. But we had to learn a different instrument every year. We had to our final instead of a thesis, basically we had to produce a whole CD and write the music and the orchestrations and everything. Yeah. So there was songwriting, there was music analysis, also like studio recording, so the more technical side, running bands, like a very all over the place, which to me was a lot of fun. I got to sort of see a lot of
you made the link earlier to agile, a lot of teamwork, I would say, because if you have to produce something, you have to ask multiple people to play a part, certain things, and they have to collaborate, and you're there as a kind of conductor because you wrote the part, but you're also a producer. How did that go?
Yeah, well, when that remark was about a specific experience, but yeah, I conducted a choir, I conducted orchestras, I also did film music. I wrote film music and I recorded film music for Dirk Brosset, who is like a famous Belgian.
Wow.
But my remark was about I wrote music for TV advertising. That was like one of the few things where I did make a little bit of money. But I kind of hated it because everybody in that industry wants to be the creative. So even if you're talking to a secretary, they'll be like, but maybe you should try this. And they wanted to prove that they had creative. For everybody, it was a foot in the door to get the real creative jobs.
There were people who felt that they were creative and they took the secretary job.
So they were right. They would be people who had a background in arts or in creative spaces, but to get a job in advertising, their entry path was just doing whatever job they could get, which wasn't necessarily a creative job. But then they were hoping to get a foot in the door. But it's this I didn't know the term back then, but pure bike shedding world where everybody wants to have some impact. I would write 7 versions of some music, and then somebody would come in and listen and say, "Oh, but it needs more melody in the drums," or some weird remark that doesn't make sense. And then at one point, even I had they had finally agreed on version 17. I booked the recording studio. I booked the musicians. We're recording. I get a phone call. Yeah, there's somebody else from whatever management at the client who thinks they should go in a different direction, and it would just never. you never made.
You were in the studio recording already, and
we had to shut it down, and that's of course not very nice for anybody. But one of the things I learned there was sort of my first insight, I guess, there in working with people was I started actually making the version that I think it should have, and then I made some worse versions as well, and I would play the worst versions to the clients, and then they would say something like, "Yeah, but it needs a bit more of that oomph factor." I say, "Yeah, I think what you mean. Let me try something." I would put on my headphones and mess around a bit, just play one of the other versions, say, "How about this?" "Yes, that's exactly what I was saying." And that worked. And then when I sort of got into software, I had this idea of, okay, this advertising world is really weird, and people don't know what they want and what they need, etc. But in software, it's there's a requirement, and then you build it, and then it either works or it's broken, and you fix it, and that's it. That was sort of the illusion I had. Turns out, of course, that it's exactly the same. But I felt like, yeah, I've seen this. I've seen worse. I can handle this. That was sort of, I guess, before I even knew Agile existed. I only learned about that later when I got into software. But I guess some of that I had to already learn some of that the hard way before I got into software, which was sort of
So if you think back about, because you came into music with the idea to make it in the music industry, I think, or at least to do something with that. Was that something that was, I don't know, already for a long time in that you wanted to do that as a young
It was like
young boy?
always. Uh, as soon as I could read, basically, I learned programming and I started playing music, and there were like two obvious things, and then programming sort of disappeared for a while, and it was all music, and it was just sort of the only thing I could imagine doing when I like was 18. Um, I was good because if I had like uh, I was a bit tired of school, and I don't feel I've had. I don't feel that the schooling system worked for me. Let's put it that way. Um, and I didn't want to learn anything or like have anything school like. So it was sort of a rescue for me to do conservatory, which of course was still school, but it was like worth it to the few things that I had to like properly study. For the first time, I actually studied when I was in music school
Because
because it was
but
like
what I heard you say is earlier on is like there was a lot of work, you used a lot of things, but it was less with your brain. It's more, well, you still use your brain for music, but it's less studying in behind the desk, I would think.
it was a lot more doing and sort of learning through osmosis because we would be like it was music day and night, right? I would go to friends' places and we would uh, improvise musicals together and things like that. It was just day and night. Either we were making music or talking about music or listening to music or and so
And that was always because you say we, so it's always with a couple of people that you're doing stuff together and not so much on your own. Is that a right?
oh well the writing was mostly on my own.
Hmm.
I did have some co-writers at different times, but a lot of the writing is very solitary. But the learning like the being embedded in music was very social, right? It's or teachers as well. They wouldn't really put us in classrooms all that much. They would take us, like they would do the sound for a concert or something, or they would have like a recording sessions with a band or whatever they were doing. They would take us along, and it was much more of a mentoring approach than a school approach.
Mhm.
And then with friends, we would like try stuff and experiment and make things and play together, and yeah.
And did you have some of that already in high school, like playing in bands, or being? Did you have
Oh
music
yeah.
in school, or how should I see that?
Yeah, I was always like, well, the music in school wasn't much, but I went to like just music school as well. I played in bands. I was always like, if the school had like the school I was at had like a yearly sort of concert where all the students who wanted to could perform stuff. So I was always doing lots of things in those things. We would actually, I had a little band and we would go to other schools to perform during lunch, things like that.
Wow. Okay, so you were actually rather busy already in that case.
Yeah. Well, finding excuses to not be at my own school, but
Yeah, as you do in that age, if you can, and if people allow it one way or another.
yeah.
Okay, and I have the feeling we already talked a little bit also about the next question, but maybe there's something else. If you had not been doing what you've been doing now, do you have any idea what could have become of you?
Well, music probably, but there was a lot of stuff where, like, I hadn't figured out how to make that a profession, and because I wasn't gigging much, I was mostly writing. You don't meet people, so you don't find people who need you to write music for them, and I sort of underestimated all of that. So I would have had to figure that out, probably. Alternatively, I don't know, anything was possible. I guess cooking maybe, but well, back then I didn't really. I liked cooking, but I wasn't really. I never considered that as a profession. Now it's something I sometimes dream of, but well, not dream of, but sort of think about. Like it would probably be fun, but then I think about more realistically, like being a professional chef would probably involve a lot of stressful work as well.
Yeah, I
But
think yeah.
but
If
yeah,
you
maybe something
screw
like
up,
that.
there is people depending on you, and there's a lot there. I think, um,
And for
and
someone who's
also very crazy hours, I would say.
yeah, and for someone who's trying to live off my writing, I was writing way too slow as well, so I would have had to figure that out as well. It took me a very long time to finish, music, and yeah, you need to be a fast writer if you want to live off your writing.
Yeah, I can imagine, because it's more about, well, the volume in a way, because yeah, the chances that you can live off one piece of music, yeah,
Yeah,
I think even the people that do have a hit that is enough to live off, they actually have written quite a lot of music, in many cases,
exactly.
in many different kind of music genres, and many different kind of things.
Yeah,
In Ghent, I know a few people who are, yeah, professional musicians, and it is indeed not easy. And yeah, and they either play in multiple bands, or the people who are focusing on writing, it's indeed they write music for all kind of things.
yeah,
When I used to be a DJ, and one of the things I liked to do was look on the records, like, okay, who wrote this, and who wrote this, both the music and the lyrics. And it was always interesting to see so many names coming back, and sometimes, like, oh,
yeah,
okay, that person wrote this as well. I thought he was this kind of, I don't know, frontman of this music band, but actually, when you then learn more, they're actually making more money with the songs they write for others sometimes. So that's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly.
it's making money, living of music is not that easy, especially in Belgium. I think it's yeah.
Yeah, well, name five Belgian film music composers if you want a little challenge.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think
serious, right? Don't try.
yeah, I'm not going to even try. I was thinking, like, I probably know only one, and you already mentioned him. So yeah, that would be my limit. Um, but yeah, but it's interesting to see, because it's not the first time we talk about music on this podcast. A lot of people in the agile community have some experience with music, have been one way or another, even professional musicians. Some people living off that, or managing bands, or other kind of things. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
an interesting. There must be something in the genes that help for or that
Well,
bring these kind of people to agile one way or another, I would say.
yeah. Well, one maybe not agile, but for programming, one hypothesis I've heard is that because music and programming both deal in sort of abstract languages to describe sort of very abstract concepts, really, that don't real well concepts that don't exist in our sort of direct experience, right? We don't have like a 100,000 years of evolution dealing with software and those kind of
Mm,
structures. The
true.
same for
Well,
music.
maybe from music. I don't know. I can imagine
Well,
that.
we probably have music for that long, but not as something where like modern music notation is very very
Ah,
recent
true.
invention. Right?
Yeah, that's something that
So
is very
having like
very new. Yeah.
a language to describe something very abstract that doesn't have a very physical form,
Mhm.
that's maybe the
Well, and for me, the link
motivation.
with agile is also that what we learn from experimenting and doing and collaborating, and that's what I see also a lot happening in music. Yeah, and the collaboration, but also the improvisation, and trying to, yeah, learn something by doing. But there are still a lot of differences as well. Let's move to that third question. What do you consider your biggest challenge, and at least the biggest challenge you want to put open on the internet, and why
Yeah.
is that a good thing for you?
Yeah, this is kind of a hard one because a lot of what I do is trying, many things and then seeing what works. And I've always worked that way. One challenging thing has been writing, well, and we're still working on it, the book with Rebecca Worsbrock. I've been writing for 15 years about software, um, but working with her, it feels like I'm learning to write. She's very like she challenges me a lot. She's everything is like, why are we writing this? What is this for? Are we actually saying the thing we want to say? Should we say it? Are we communicating that correctly? All of that is, we write, like, for every page we publish, we probably write 5 that we throw away. So that's
Again,
what.
let's say you need to write something with the idea you want to throw away at least, and you're doing it at least 5 times. Wow.
Probably, yes. But I also feel it's the best writing I've ever done, so I'm very happy about it. The other thing, maybe, my biggest challenge, well, the thing when you start a company to do the thing you love is that you end up doing a lot of things to run the company and very little of the thing you love, which is the software modeling and software design, of course.
You can delegate some of these, huh?
I know, but yeah, some things if you're small, you have to do
I
a lot
do
of
understand
things,
that part.
and I do delegate, and it's getting better. But also, I'm sort of at peace with it, right? It's a very interesting challenge. You learn a lot about all the things that I'd never thought I'd be doing, like sales and marketing and finance and accounting and all these things. And actually, they're all interesting, right? For every one of those things I do, I feel like if I could just focus on that, I would actually love this. I would, read about it. I would get good at it, or I would find mentors. So I would just be focused on, like, even accounting could be interesting if you put your mind to it, I think.
Okay.
I'm serious about this, right? This is not just sort of, numbers and spreadsheets, but there's,
there I get it. Yeah, I'm busy in the current company working on a budget, but we're using it's one of the most interesting times of doing it, using it to think about, okay, what's the future, where do we want to go, and that kind of stuff. And so if you just look at
that's one example, but even actual, like, I don't know, taxes, for example, there's different models of how you build your accounting and how to reason about that. There's schools of philosophy. There's different approaches that have different benefits and downsides. All I'm saying is I can imagine that for me personally, if today I decided I'm going to be an accountant, I would have a blast with it. I would geek out and be like the geekiest accountant ever. I'm not going to do that, but I have this feeling for a lot of the things that I am doing. But the most interesting thing about this company is sort of, can I like balancing the ideas I have after doing consulting for this long and thinking and writing and speaking about software design and modeling a lot. So I want to transfer this to my colleagues on the one hand. On the other hand, I don't want to just dictate how they should do things. I want to learn from them. I want us to be open to many different approaches. And finding that balance is very interesting, I think. There's many ways to skin a cat. And if you know all of them, then you're probably in the best position.
I like that idea indeed, because it's like you say, if you can get to that energy to learn and to saying, like, okay, what can I learn, what can I do with it, that and
I'm very aware of the I call it the buyer's bias. So if you hire let's say a database consultant, right? Just to give an example, you already know the outcome, right? It's going to be a set of changes to the database, right? That's what you'll get. And for us, of course, we're software modeling and like we do event storming and things like that. If you hire an event storming person, the outcome will be an event stormed model. But and that's not the fault of the consultant. That's something that I sort of realized after a while. It's the buyer who already decided, I have a problem that can be solved by hiring a database consultant. So the challenge is,
and if you don't do it as a consultant, if you push back, and why are you asking, many of the customers are annoyed because they're like, no.
Yeah.
This is what you need to solve. No, let's go back to why you want that. That's many customers don't like.
Why do you want DDD training? Well, because our people are not very trained in DDD, right? That's not the problem indeed. So this sort of thing, like being at the very least, you need to know a lot more things than the things you're consulting on, so that you can recognize when it's not just the problem you're hired for. And then the other skill that sort of comes with that is I call it guerrilla consulting, where you're hired for one thing, but you're sneakily also trying to impact some other thing that you're not hired for, but you truly believe that it's necessary to deal with it, which could be, if the reason that your project is failing is because two people are never speaking to each other, maybe you can negotiate or facilitate or something. That's not your job, and if you do too much of that, then you're not doing what you're hired for, which is a problem. But finding a little bit of that sometimes can be
but I recognize that. I also know that the first 10 years of my own company, I did all my accounting myself with an accountant, but I put everything in the accountancy system that my accountant then verified. And I'm pretty sure that didn't save me any money, because he had to check multiple things. But I learned so much about it, and I was very much aware about the numbers. And every time I thought, now I will be really good at entering it, I didn't learn that enough, because or I found new mistakes to make. I don't know, but just learning the importance about money for a company. What does it mean? Everything at all kind of levels. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad I'm no longer doing that, because I'm glad I can move that away.
I'm always glad to delegate things, and as we grow, there's a lot of things where I don't have the detail, but it's good to have I think the biggest lesson there is there's a lot of people in software who believe that their managers are idiots, and I don't believe that anymore, because if you have to deal with this many things and with many. And we're still a small company, right? But if it's a big company, everybody has an agenda, everybody has an opinion. They all want to influence you. And then as an executive, you want people to come to you with sort of, the bullet points with already their preference pre-selected, that sort of thing. That's not because they're idiots. That's a complexity management strategy. And there's no other way. You can't be at the top level and be an expert in everything. So it's more, the filtering skill becomes more important than the actual detailed knowledge about the thing you're making decisions about. And I think a lot of people in software, in agile, underestimate that if you're not with your nose on top of the one thing, but instead doing many other different things, the strategies and the language that you're used to don't work.
I'm these days, I'm actually today working as an engineering manager for exactly the reason what you say, to actually start doing the job. And I've done similar kind of jobs in the past, but for a long time I've been coaching people who are in this role at engineering level or C-level, CTO, or whatever. But doing a job, you actually, again, you see all the balls that are in the air, and like you say, I see the people that think I'm an idiot, both above me, below me, whatever, in all kind of directions. And it's
Are they watching?
I have no idea. So, but I think it's in a way, for me, it's every person tries to do the best job they can do. I really believe that, and we don't do things on purposely bad. But somehow we might not have all the information, and if you want to take too much, I might take sometimes too much time to take information, then it's also not good. I need to make quicker decisions, and so all these things that are in the air, definitely something that is worth doing from time to time. And there's two things that worry me about coaches. Is that one is that people, I've seen coaches who've never been coached themselves. I don't like that, because you don't know what it is, and they're trying to coach people that they have no clue what their job is. If you've never, and I'm not saying that every coach should be a software developer, but if you have a coaching team, I've sometimes been in larger companies where you have like 5 to 10 coaches running around. If none of them have ever written a a line of code, then you just know that it's not going to work.
Mm.
You need to have at least some connection, I think. And I really like the way you say it, like learning some of that to open up the biases and to learn from that. So thanks for sharing these. It's very interesting. Again, here and in the answers to a lot of the questions, and actually also how I know you, you're a very driven and a passionate person. Do you know where that drive or where that passion is coming from?
In general terms, I don't think I have an answer to that. Maybe there's some sort of, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well kind of thing behind that. I'm very interested in many things, and I have to like continuously tell myself to to drop some of the things so I can at least focus on a few of them. But yeah, and then in more specific terms, like software design, I have this sort of I want to improve the world. I think we as a species can do a lot better. I'm sort of a short-term pessimist, but a long-term optimist about humanity. But and of course, I can't, on your own, you can't change the world. But the one area where I can maybe have a little bit of impact is software design, and I think that there's going to be, as software becomes more and more important, these sort of bugs that kill 1 million people in a second, right? That's going to happen, and these kind of bugs already exist, right? Facebook is a bug like that. And it has. I'm serious. That's bad design.
The impact it had on politics and on other kind of stuff. It's
Yeah,
definitely
that is not. Yeah, that's not because they carefully considered everything, and it's because they move fast and break things, and then stuff started breaking, right? And it's not our fault. But
or they don't fix it because they
don't
have
fix it,
some advantages of money wise or whatever. Yeah,
that of course as well, right? And so what I hope to achieve is by teaching and helping people do better software design, that hopefully some of those bugs will be prevented by better design and better thinking and better philosophy, and I can only I can only hope to plant some seeds, but yeah, it's something I think about, like is there what's the impact of this, right?
And it's do you have because you're talking about the negative parts, do you already see sometimes, or do you get sometimes feedback about people about some of that things that you see? Oh, actually these people have learned, they probably will never tell you, oh, we prevented this kind of bug, but do you see other kind of feedback?
Well, coincidentally, I spoke to a potential customer, and the person there, there were a few people in the meeting, but the person who took the initiative is somebody that I did some work with, one of my very first clients actually, and the company became part of the company that now contacted us. But they're still using basically the initial design that we set up. They grew, like they're 10 times as many engineers now, and people come and go, and sort of obviously some of that knowledge gets lost, and they're trying to sort of get back to that. But a lot of the sort of initial ideas that we worked on back then around event sourcing and distributed systems and how and their models for their domain are basically still there, and they're contacting us to make sure that they can keep doing that. So that's like a nice bit of feedback, right? If 10 years later people are or longer, people are still doing the way you do things, because software design has a very, very slow feedback cycle, right? All the work you do, and same with a lot of things in agile, right? But you only get to see the benefits much later, which is why people don't do it, right? There's always the quick fix where you see the immediate benefit, and the
But
right
and you don't
feedback.
see the technical depth or whatever about the quick fix. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's nice when people come back and they use your ideas, and so that's something that's now happening, I guess, because I've been long enough into it that I start getting that sort of like 10 years later feedback, which is
And do you regularly reach out to people, or do you? Yeah, is there a way that you try to get more of that feedback, or is this just yeah by coincidence that that came back to you?
yeah. Well, in this case, it was simply because they had a problem and they decided to reach out to us. But I don't like have a like any sort of structure or mechanism to ask for that feedback. But I organize a conference on software design called Domain Driven Design Europe, and which is always like a reunion party of all the people I've worked with and or encountered throughout the
Oh,
years.
that's how you get so many people together. This is just old clients that you group together. Like,
It's not just that, of course, but
okay.
it's normal that your clients come back to the conferences you organize, but
Mhm.
and also just the community. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that because it's for me. It's one of the things I've been said. I learned it from Jim McCarthy from the core protocols that I gave. I think I learned it from him. Is to offer my clients like free lifetime support. Like if you have a question about anything I did, even if it's just something I wrote or a tweet or whatever, if you have a question, you can just come back to me. And I've had a lot of that. That because of that, I get lots of feedback out of these things. And
Yeah.
in many, there are even cases where I get a question and I somehow it inspires me, and I quickly write a long answer. I send it and then realize like, but I have the exact same problem at my current client, but I was so much into it that I couldn't see it. And because I get a question from somewhere else, I quickly
Yeah.
have an answer, and I'm trying, how did that come that I have so quick an answer? Because I have the exact same problem. I just didn't take time to look
Yeah.
into that. But
I
for me,
like
the
that.
nice, yeah.
I wrote it down. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought you wrote it down, but I like that idea so much indeed to offer people to contact me, and of course not everybody does it. It takes a little while, and I did these days. I say I give what is it an SLA of 48 hours, so I'm not going to reply in the minute, of course, because I'm busy with other stuff. But usually it's in less than 24 hours that I try to give a reply. Sometimes very short,
Yeah.
and some repeat business came out of that. But for me, that's not the main goal. My main goal is to actually learn about how did people like, because that reaches again to stories that I can tell later again.
Yeah.
And that's something, yeah.
And
Getting
doesn't it go
feedback
wrong
from
because in the early years of my career, I remember one client where it was a very short thing. I went there for 3 days or something, but then the one of the people kept like asking me stuff on chat for a long time, like, and I was always writing these very long answers, and it became
um,
very
yeah, if it happens too much, I there's like two or three people that really reached out a lot, but then I try to
yeah,
turn it into like, look, it sounds like you need more help, so maybe I can come in for a day. And
yeah.
in some of the cases I did come in again, and that gave some repeat business. In some of the things, yeah, then, but well, at
I
least
was
I have.
probably too polite at the time.
Well, I think it took me a while to realize like how much indeed energy would I want to spend to that.
Yeah,
But of course, if I would feel that they're abusing it, that's that
yeah,
is
that
not
makes sense.
nice. And at the same time, it might be because their bosses are not supporting them enough, and they keep asking me, but they don't get any budget. But again, that might be a message that I might bring. I did do that already, contacting back a boss or a new boss of a person. I say, I'm not going to say who, but one of your people keep reaching out to me because they have trouble. You don't need to hire me, but at least do some training or do something else. And sometimes they don't like that, and they're like, "Oh, you're trying to sell," and sometimes that gives repeat business.
Yeah,
Um, but I've seen for me, after doing this for many years, I have very little of people that are abusing it. Or I'm again too nice, like you say, and then I don't realize it. So yeah, that's a little bit the thing. Well, and we talked already a bit about some of the achievements. What do you consider your biggest achievement so far? And maybe, and that's something I've realized while doing this series, is that basically this is your moment to brag. And what I realized is that for some people it's not that easy. Is that for you, Matthias? Is that easy to be proud of something you've done?
Um, I can be proud of something. It's just that I'm already, because I'm always like trying many different things. I'm always already looking at the next thing while I get the results of the thing that succeeded. Um, but well, I mentioned the book Design and Reality. It's not finished. It's a bunch of sort of semi-independent essays, but I'm very proud about that. And then the as an achievement, sort of the Europe conference, maybe not the most important thing or whatever that I've done, or the most challenging thing, but it's the thing with the most sort of visible impact, where there wasn't really a community when I started that. It was a Yahoo group, and that was about it. And now that's sort of a vibrant community. We get, without even trying, we get like 500 CFP submissions of very high quality. It's a very diverse community, which also was not the case when we started. So I'm very proud of that, and that diversity as well, because when I started the conference in 2016, well, that was the first edition. The plan started 2 years earlier, but I
As
had
they
this
do.
idea of, as they do, right? But like, I had this idea of, can we make a diverse conference without hacks? And by hacks, I mean things like, you can do scholarships, or you can do special, like reaching out to groups that encourage women speakers, or things like that. I'm not against any of that, but I wanted to like set up enabling constraints for ourselves that would force us to make a conference that underrepresented groups in IT would want to come to. So we really, like, I hired diversity consultants to really understand how to do things. Well, and I hired a woman to basically lead the organization, and then we started like really finding ways of getting feedback and incorporating that. So it's not just the speakers themselves, right, but also for participants. Like, one idea that I'm still very proud of is that I had was, we publish on our website or everything we do and we don't do in terms of accessibility and inclusion, etc. But also the things we don't do, or the things that we are maybe considering but haven't made a decision on. Because there's a lot of things you don't know if you need them. You don't know, or they can be expensive, or things like that. But it's sort of allowed people to see that we are open to this, and we're not just sort of, let's have a code of conduct because you're supposed to have one. And I think that has.
So you see it broader than just the code of conduct, but actually, yeah.
Yes. That's one of the things I learned, right? It's a code of conduct is the starting point, right? It's not the end point. It's you have to talk about it. I do that every year on stage when I open the conference. I talk about it. You have to make sure that people feel safe to report things. You have to encourage them, because people think, oh, this happened, but it's done now. I don't worry about it anymore. But if they report it, we can prevent it for other people. So you have to raise awareness about that as well. And then you have to be clear that if there is a violation, that you're actually doing something about it, so that people don't think that it's just a wordless text somewhere on a web page. But it's not just code of conduct, right? It's everything. It's there's people everywhere who can't go to a conference for many reasons. Right? I talked to somebody who has agoraphobia. I most conferences would simply assume that if they are even confronted with that question, because people won't tell them unless you invite them to give that feedback. But that person contacted us, told us about it. I spoke to them. They gave me, they showed me at the venue the things that worked for them and the things that didn't work for them. And now we have.
And that was before the conference, or
so they contacted us before. Because we ask people, when you buy a ticket, we ask if there's any sort of accessibility or other requirements that you have. We learned a lot from that as well. And so we didn't have to do a lot of adaptations for this event, but next year we're moving to a different venue, which has a much more of a big open lobby space. And so he told me during the conference about some things that we would have to do to make that bigger space manageable for him. So that's something I'm very proud of, that it's not just sort of a reflection of the state of the industry, which is usually a very white male centric, but that we sort of can break out of that and do something better.
And I think I think interesting is that, well, interesting. It's normal if you think about it, but sometimes people say, yeah, but if you do all these changes, then it's less interesting. No, it's became very important conference at all levels, and so it's not by adapting or helping out some people who might have trouble otherwise joining. It actually reached a level even higher than many other kind of conferences.
Yeah, well, in terms of accessibility, there's a lot of things where they are a big problem for a very small group of people, but they are sort of a small problem for most people that they just don't worry about, because it's part of it, but you actually improve it for everybody. And then in terms of the quality itself, that's sort of all the logistics, etc. But the content, the sessions and the labs that we do, etc. I find it kind of insulting when people sort of say something like, yeah, but you shouldn't focus on gender or ethnicity or any of those things. You should get the best quality. They seem to believe that I spent the last 10 years pouring all this energy into a conference, and that I would then pick speakers that are low quality just to make some point about diversity. No,
exactly.
No,
it's the opposite.
That's not how it works at all. That's like and if you
and you have the data to prove it. I think. I mean, DDD Europe is really, I consider it the highest standard. So it really is, and so we know that it in theory, I think that it's been proven already, but you have actually a conference that proves it for everybody who's been there, like, hey, this is a high level standard. So yeah.
Oh, I appreciate that.
No, but I think and that's just why I wanted to stress it out, because sometimes people who might not understand it might think, but then it works for me. No, it's actually, like you say, the small little annoyances for us that we might not realize, that might be a big problem for someone else. But if it's solved for that other person, I might not even realize how bad it is on my side. And that's I really like that kind of.
And the people who think that you can't find diverse speakers that can deliver high quality presentations are people who don't expose themselves to that, right? If you keep going to the same conferences with the same people, no diversity, then you have no examples, and you don't even, you can't imagine it exists if you don't bother to expose yourself. So that's the difference, right? If you sort of get out there and go to see other people, the underrepresented groups talk about things, you see different perspectives, you get a lot more open-minded about all these things. and
And
then
we
finding
talked
good
about
content.
design. I mean, design, then we also talked about software that might be creating problems. Well, the more diverse your community is about design, the better your software will become again, because you
Exactly.
realize much better which some of the software that we're creating
Yeah.
might not work for some people.
Yeah,
And
a lot of our programmers are basically 25-year-old white male gamers, right? That's it's true, right? A lot of people get into
oh yeah.
programming because of games, and nothing against that, right? But if that's the only world experience that goes into your software. Of course, if you think that software is just typing, turning requirements into code, then you don't see this as a problem. But if you think as software as a design activity, which it is, right, you're always finding solutions for novel problems, because if the problem is solved, you can just copy the software infinitely. So you're always solving novel problems, and if you're always solving that with the same limited amount of sort of life experience and exposure to the world, then you're not going to find diverse solutions. You're going to be
Mhm.
stuck in
Yeah,
loops.
and yeah, and let's face it, most of the programs that we're writing are not games either. I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. There is, I think, no piece of software that I've been installed the last year where there weren't any things that I thought, like, come on, really, in 2024 we still have this kind of problems, and yeah, and
Yeah.
and and sometimes I might be just indeed the annoying white man, but I know that for some of the problems that I see, that there are actually, it might just annoy me, but it might be make it almost useless to use it for other kind of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah,
uh,
and then you get sort of the attraction to novelty, right? Like AI is a good example. I'm sure there's a lot of potential in AI, but right now every company is sort of trying to to adopt AI. And I read this opinion piece this morning. This is why it's on my mind. I'll send you the link later. But the author was saying, most organizations aren't operationally efficient enough to simply deliver a CRUD app in 6 months that works, right? And we're going to roll out sort of massive AI untested stuff, across that is still moving very fast across whole organizations. It's going to be a mess again. And you need different
and
point of
and
view.
well, the only thing so, well, we've been talking about fourth generation languages for years. When I was studying, they were also like, yeah, in the future programming will be drawing boxes and that's it. Yeah, that's what we're using to teach our children programming. But then we move on to real languages because you can still do much better stuff. The only thing I can see is that if you write, or the way I look at AI these days is like, yes, I can write something and I get some software, and then I will realize that what I've written is actually not a good requirement. And that's, for me, if we talk about feedback loops, that is the hardest part, the feedback loop between writing something as this is what I want, and then having the software. So my hope, and probably very naive idea, is that with these kind of tools, maybe we'll get quicker feedback on the way we describe our problems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
not
do
sure.
kind of want to challenge it a little bit in the sense that, I mean, I think we can get there. So far the history of programming languages has been higher and higher abstraction levels. Uh, but I think we're sort of right now stuck in a bit of this sort of local optimum where everybody believes that textual programming languages are the best, and that visual programming languages or even conversational can't work. And then nobody's investing in it, and it kind of needs a big investment. There's like a jump to be made, right, for to move
Mm.
away from textual programming language. So we're sort of in this sort of local optimum where nobody wants to really take the deep dive and build an actual rich proper visual programming language. And maybe I'm not fully aware of everything that exists now in terms of low code and no code, so maybe there are actual things happening there that can really work. And then as for AI, like it's sort of backwards to me that right now the belief is that the best thing AI can do is generate textual code for us, right? That's like a weird line of thinking to me. Can we sort of skip that, right? Can we tell an AI to do stuff for us without having to convert it to textual code that we need to then sort of treat in the same
Well, in the way that they're generating videos and pictures, like, I mean, that's
yeah, but
that
generate actual behavior,
programs for behavior.
predictable processes, right? Business processes that are run by AI that you describe how they should work and that you can trust that work without having to generate a traditional program. I don't know, right? I'm very
And be predictable. I mean, when you ask the same
yeah.
question, you should always get the same result, of course. That's,
Well, yes, but also there's maybe a whole category of problems that right now we're not solving with software because they are sort of more heuristic and less. They don't require this sort of accuracy, right? So
right. Okay.
that's maybe
Yeah,
another direction where we might use AI for things that don't need predictable
accuracy.
business process. But yeah,
Right. Yeah, definitely I can see some of that. But in that sense, very interesting times to see where we're going
yeah.
and how the design would be changed on all of these things.
Well, and Eric Evans said that at the DD Europe conference at the last one last month. Like he says, maybe there's a future where we get singularity and AI becomes so smart that it improves itself, and we're all out of a job, right? We can't prepare for that scenario because who knows what would happen, right? It'd be so drastic. Or maybe it's already reached a plateau and we're not going to get more than what we have now, which is sort of generating cliches, basically, right? That's what Gen AI is doing right now. It's sort of taking the average of all the text or all the code or all the images that it has and produces something average. And then we also don't need to prepare. But maybe there's another scenario where it is disruptive, but it still has a place for us. But it's not like doing everything, right? It still needs us. And then then the job is we'll need people who can understand requirements, and the sort of requirements we'll get will be more advanced because we can handle more advanced things. So we'll need people who can take these very advanced requirements and get an AI to do them and do that communication, basically, which is fundamentally programming, but in a new form. And that's the one scenario that we can prepare for by starting to think about how that would work and what skills you would need. So
yeah, I agree, because it's basically the requirement. Well, the best way to write requirements these days is the code, in a way, and so it would be nice if indeed we can go to another kind of level of writing these requirements.
So we go to higher abstraction levels, but at every abstraction level, you need somebody who can translate from a need into that language, which used to be punch cards, and then we keep getting higher up. Now you can just sort of plug cloud services together and things like that, and APIs, but you still need somebody who's able to do that, right? Then we make a single person can make a much more advanced thing in a matter of weeks because of all these abstractions. I can just hook up like OCR and voice recognition and all these things just out of the box and make something, but you still need somebody who can do that. So if you go to a higher abstraction level where you can just talk to an AI, the sort of things people will expect from that, like the competition will be much higher. So you will need the same kind of brain to do that interaction. That's the
I really like that, and especially the well, my father he was programming what is in the 70s or something like that. He once told me how he created his own database, like not creating tables, but the real whatever that we
programming a database. Yes,
programming a database. It took me actually a couple of minutes before I understood what he was saying. But that's the kind of extraction layer that are different. Now we have building blocks, and we can okay,
Yeah.
I can even think about a SQL or a NoSQL. That's already two building blocks of types of databases. And well, if I understand these, then I might be better to know which one I need. But I don't have to write everything myself. I just have a building block that does that.
Exactly.
The cloud services is another level of building blocks, and there's actually a lot of
Yeah.
building blocks inside these services. Yeah, these are in that sense very interesting times to see where we are going and what kind of level of abstraction that we're getting into that. And definitely, I can see then that okay, that could be a building block that actually looks like visual languages and some of the no code going in that direction. But again, the more you understand what's happening below, the better you might understand some of how to use a building block probably.
Yeah. And then, of course, Eric's conclusion as the author of the domain-driven design book and at the domain-driven design conference was that the sort of skills in that last scenario that will be needed are the sort of skills that are that DDD advocates, right? It's modeling and understanding and communication between different groups and all that. It's maybe a bit self-serving, and of course, I'm biased as well, but I don't think he's wrong, though. It's like
but in a way, every developer is some kind of a designer or an architect, and some of the junior people might not realize it. But everybody who can learn more of these DDD skills is actually helping us in all, even if you're not officially designer or architect or whatever you're doing it. Yeah, you need these kind of skills these days, I would say.
Yeah, but I use designer in a very broad sense. Anyone who has an impact on the design of the system. So.
Exactly. Okay, let's move to that next question. What do you have a personal agility tip to share?
Well, many, but one that I have been thinking about a lot. I call them my loss aversion heuristics.
Wow.
Well, loss aversion is something from. Have you heard of this in psychology?
I've heard about it, but I'm not sure what you mean with that in this particular case.
What do you know about it?
Definitely not sure. Not enough, I would say.
Okay. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No. But I think people are being afraid of things that are losing or lost in part of their lives, and have all the. I wouldn't want to call it trauma because it's a little bit exaggerated, but little traumas maybe in a way.
Yeah,
and that has impact.
Yeah, it's very often sort
of good definition that is.
Well, obviously it's aversion to loss, and it's usually like the experiments in Kahneman. A lot of them are sort of economic loss, right? You find, like, one of the examples is you find a bag with €1 million on the street, and you're very happy, and you walk home and you get mugged and you lose half the €1 million. So you're very sad because you lost €500,000. But if you find,
which you didn't have exactly.
And then if you find €500,000 and you don't get robbed, then you're very happy. But it's sort of a toy example, of course. But the idea is, and that's sort of well, I don't know how well it's proven with all the reproducibility crisis in psychology, but the idea is that we overvalue potential loss and we undervalue potential gains. Right? So if there's a choice between two things, you'll pick the one that has the least risk of or perceived risk of loss, even if the gain of the other thing might be a lot higher. So it's sort of an asymmetry in our loss.
And that has impact, if I remember correctly, on how we make decisions, but also on how salespeople might be framing things because they want you to feel that you're. That's a lot.
So of course, smart people will use that, to their advantage. The way I started thinking about it, well, it's not just. I think it's not just economic loss, which would be a lot harder to prove probably in psychology, but just we've worked on this plan. If we don't do this plan, it feels like a loss, even if the other plan is maybe much better, right? But it feels like a loss. So we are averse to not using our plan because we worked on it. There's something called I think it's called the IKEA effect, where if you build the IKEA furniture yourself and you try to sell it, you'll charge a higher price than if you're selling somebody else's build, even if it's the exact same thing, but you value it
Yeah,
more.
and people value it that if they're able to put an IKEA closet together, they value it more than. That if
So
they-
I think we have loss aversion over many things that are not necessarily very quantifiable as in economic terms. IDs, time that we spend on things, sort of emotional connection, relationships, all these kind of things. So I have basically 3 heuristics, right? One is, I call it the personal loss aversion heuristic. So the loss aversion is I'm trying to have an aversion to loss aversion. It's sort of that's why the name. But so I try to always think about what I'm afraid of losing, and trying to see, am I is my judgment clouded because of that, right? What am I worried about losing here? And actually, the option where I do lose something, take that as a serious option, right? Maybe let's actually investigate. Maybe I should pick that option, even though I might lose. I don't know. We had the example earlier of but the biggest client is using that feature. Maybe it's worth losing the biggest client over this, right? We're not considering it because we don't think like that. If you're losing something, it's already a bad thing.
Maybe that client has cost us so much in technical debt to keep something alive that actually is and maybe developers walked away because we had to keep supporting that part. And it's definitely.
So the perceived loss compared to the potential gain, and the maybe unperceived loss, developers walking away, indeed, where you would never know why, but you think, oh, it's just normal. It's developers stay at a job for 2 or 3 years. I don't know, whatever the average is, and you just think it's normal, but maybe there is something like that, right? So I have this because your question was a personal agility tip. At a personal level, I try to be very aware of my own loss aversion, right? That's step one, and constantly make that exercise, like one trick there is to remind me of the times that I actually did make a change or decision where I risked losing something, but I actually did gain something, right? So building sort of the happy memories of the successes when I deliberately lost something. But then the next level is I started thinking about, well, I'm not the only one who has this, right? So I call this my distributed loss aversion heuristic. Everybody's afraid of losing something, right? And if we can find that, if we can make that explicit, we can start properly evaluating these options. So the losing the customers is one example. Could be people have worked hard on this project, and now we are maybe getting rid of it. They are afraid of losing something, right? Which is very much perceived, right? Because having worked on a project, whether that project then materializes or not, strictly speaking, it doesn't imply any sort of real loss. You haven't economically lost something. You already did the work. You were paid for the work. It's your emotional attachment to the work you did that that gives you the perception of loss.
Yeah,
So,
and a lot of people have the thing, the sunken costs already. We're thinking about the money that we spent, but okay, at some point we need to cut our losses as well and make to say like, okay, it's not working. Let's not keep investing it. And somehow that's very hard for people once we start investing. And if it doesn't matter if it's money or time, it's like that's
sunken cost fallacy is like a symptom of loss aversion. I would call that, right? And then my third heuristic is one step further. Even it's not just that everybody has loss aversion. It's that everybody we are conditioned to believe that everybody has loss aversion. So basically, I think that if we do this thing, even though I'm not risking to lose anything, but because you you're also in the meeting, right? And you risk that your project gets scrapped, right? So I might not propose something because intuitively I know you'll be against it because you'll lose something. So it's sort of it's like a filter we have. Like of all imagine a range of possible options, and all the options where I perceive that you will lose something, those options are not even on the table. I don't even talk about them, right? And everybody does this. So I'm trying to understand where people think for somebody else that their loss aversion would be triggered and therefore not propose something.
That's
See where I'm getting with this? Okay.
yeah, it's but yeah, you have to keep thinking about lots of different kind of things. But it reminds me about a job interview I once was, where I was doing pretty okay until, I don't know, at one point there was one developer that and I heard later that he was already fired, but he was still allowed to do an interview. But of course, he was basically kind of he felt that his boss liked me, and he basically didn't want, because his boss had fired him, like, to do that. And until this day, I don't know if that was the main reason or not, but I definitely said, like, I would never have this kind of person in an interview, because you basically don't know how this person will react to these kind of things.
Yeah, and it is probably an example of this sort of irrationality, right? Because they already lost the job, they had nothing else to lose, and still, but there might be, I don't know. Yeah, it's
again, yeah, and again, I don't know the details, and but
Sure.
it's yeah, I remember thinking about that when I heard that, like, yeah, okay, and I've made me conscious about who will I invite to interviews, because there might be other kind of reasons why people might dislike or like a person that indeed have nothing to do with the important decision that we're about to take.
Yeah, and that's the thing I look for, right? It's not just sort of rational, like there's a level of this is rational, right? If you have some economic loss or potential economic loss, you want to be careful, and a potential future gain might not be real or might not get materialized. So some of that is sort of rational, but a lot of it, I think, is a very irrational, like just the sensation of potential loss of anything non-quantifiable that maybe was already lost, but we still worry about losing it, that sort of thing. And so it's people ask me how I am able to find like many different models for something, or come up with different scenarios or strategies. And one of them is because I consciously try to consider the options where that other people filter out because there's a potential loss. And then I've sort of learned to be a bit more, diplomatic about it. Like I might say, instead of saying, well, what about if we ditch that customer, right? Then you get a very instant. Oh, no,
you get the emotions that you don't want to bring out. It's exactly, yeah.
But if you let's do like a thinking exercise. Let's find some extremes, right? What are the most extremes of this thing on all ends of the spectrum, and just to sort of have a frame and then find what we find acceptable. And so you get people a bit out of their, if people often, if you propose something just as a crazy brainstorm idea, they will react to it as if you're actually already doing it, right? So that's the difficulty with brainstorms. But if you can sort of really get them in a mindset of, okay, let's just, for the fun of it, and you propose some really absurd stuff, like what if we just liquidated the company right now and be done with all of this. I don't know, it's very extreme, but then the other things are less extreme, of course, than that. You say, well, what if
but I like that. If you put the most extreme things, then everything else doesn't seem extreme anymore.
Yeah, and then you can have like a more rational conversation about pros and cons of those, and
if people still want to listen, because there might be so much of really, really interesting. I want to move to that next question. What have you learned about remote working? Because, well, in a couple of years we all were forced to work remotely, and well, maybe you have worked remote before, but In all of that, in all of these years, what have you learned about remote working?
Well, we were doing actually almost everything on site with our clients before the pandemic. We would travel there, which wasn't really sustainable, and well, not in the ecological sense, but also in the like personal life, work-life balance sense.
Mm.
So we were already sort of playing with ideas there of going, but we couldn't really imagine it. But then the pandemic forced us to imagine things, and then I very quickly like decided, okay, we're going to be a distributed remote company, and instead of like we were struggling a bit trying all these sort of habits and patterns and things that we had developed by doing a lot of like in-person group modeling sessions, we were trying to replicate them. And then when I said, no, let's stop doing that, let's actually rebuild from scratch and think, what are we trying to achieve and what can we do remotely? There's a lot of things that you lose, right? Like, a dinner with the customer where you get some of the information that they don't tell you at the office, right? So we try to find some other ways of getting that information and also just dealing without having some of that information. So things like that, finding new patterns and really developing that. One of the benefits was I was at the start of the pandemic, I was supposed to be in an in-person workshop with Dave Snowden, the Kinevin guy. But then that one was moved to online. And the whole workshop ended up being about how to deal with crisis, which was so at the start of a crisis like that, being in a workshop by Dave Snowden about how to deal with crisis was gold for me. One of the things is sort of, he calls it inventory, right? You look at everything you have, and then you, instead of trying to innovate, you do acceptation. You find ways where people use what you have in novel ways to achieve something, and then you iterate on that. So that's much more efficient than trying to completely innovate from scratch. So that was very helpful, and I used that for the DD Europe conference as well, because
Which went online at that moment as well.
yes, but I was very hesitant at first because I hate online conferences most of the time. I mean, not. I don't have anything against them. It's just that for me, it doesn't really work. But it feels like often they are like basically TV with a chat channel at best, and people are doing other things. Right? People are working while they have maybe the conference on their phone or something. Right? That's and DD Europe was always very much invested in engagement, and like we have a lot of hands-on labs, we have a lot of sort of ways and like the Pac-Man method and all these kind of things to get people to talk and make the conference about conferring and not just consuming talks. Right? So we were thinking about how can we do this. So we made this inventory, right? What do we have? Well, we have a community that likes to come to these. Over the years, the people that keep coming back are the ones who want to come to these hands-on labs and who want to engage and be interactive. And we had built a speaker base of people who had, like in the beginning, we had to really beg speakers to do hands-on labs. Like, can you turn that talk into a lab, right? But now we just get lots and lots of submissions of people who have done it and who understand the point, etc. So we treated that as inventory, and then we said, how can we build an engaging online conference? We said, well, then it hit me. We just get rid of the talks. We only do the hands-on. So the entire conference was 2 days of hands-on labs and some other formats like speed networking and other things. And we only had one session that was sort of passive, which was an interview that Cyril Martrère interviewed Eric Evans about sort of the origins of domain design. But because the people were already there because they wanted to be in an interactive conference and they had already spent 2 days on Miro and all these things, we had opened the Miro board for that interview, and people were basically sketchnoting the interview, but also like commenting on it by drawing. People were doing memes as well. So anything that was said was sort of turned into funny things as well on the board. It was beautiful. And then people said afterwards, this was the online conference I didn't know I needed. So,
which is again a very nice compliment.
Yes. So now I'm bragging here. But the lesson, right? It's I think it's true for a lot of things, not just remote work, but there's a lot of things that have massively changed, right? The social media and phones and all that. I'm kicking in an open door here, but like when I was a kid, if you wanted to talk to your friend, you called to their parents' house. Hopefully they were home. Maybe you left a message. Maybe they would call you back. That was sort of normal.
And well, if I want to add some, or can add something, if you did that as a student, for example, I was living on, I don't know how to say that. Yeah, I was not living with my parents, but if I was as a student wanted to call my friends, I needed to queue up to a payphone, and the worst thing that could happen is that somebody was answering the phone, but the people that I wanted to talk were not there, because then I lost my money on top of it, and like so.
But
Yeah,
so
sorry.
what I'm getting to is that all these things we have like developed over a few 100,000 years to living in cages most of the time and living in small groups and communicating like that. I think we're only at the start of reinventing and maybe evolving, to use a big word, on how all the communication patterns will work. I think, and that's of course I'm getting into very speculative stuff here, but maybe more like if we start from the notion that all of this is very hard communication, right? And every problem can be solved by communication except the problem of too much communication. So it's normal that this is messy and stressful and that people get burnouts because of it and all that. If you start from there and then start thinking about, okay, let's accept that people are not designed for this. How can we make the environment work for them? Then, and also personal, right? Like for yourself, do you turn off your phone sometimes? Things like that. That's sort of where we need to start looking as a species, right?
I really like that, because I think, and I think, well, we're all, our communication styles are completely different. Like when I grew up, like you say, we called friends and everything, and yeah, the calling is for us rather natural. Then there was a generation that didn't like much more calling, was texting much more, and now my 16-year-old daughter, she does like short video calls. Like she sends a video message to a friend and they reply with a video message for 10 seconds, and that's how they communicate. I'm like, wow. It was like, and then I'm working with people who don't want to turn on their cameras, or not right now, but in other companies where people like, I don't want to turn on my cameras, and she's like throwing away video bits of her that is throw away, because you literally don't save these. Yeah,
and
it's a whole
we
different
kind
world.
of like our generation or even the generations before us already predicted that in sci-fi, of course, but now we're seeing it and we're still surprised, right? But we're like, that's the evidence, right? We are living in this time where every generation has an entirely different communication style. That's how fast it's moving. That has never happened before.
Or we don't remember. That could be that we don't.
Things
But
were slower. That's
yeah, that's no,
I read
definitely
somewhere
things were
about the
slower.
amount of information you consume on the day in a single day is the amount of information that your great grandfather or something consumed in a year or in a
Yeah,
life,
in a
or
year, it's
some
and
number like that.
that's if you talk about burnout, of course, we have so much more.
Yeah.
This is why I think many people are using like ChatGPT or whatever to condense large chunks of information, give me a summary of a meeting or whatever. I'm not so happy with some of the results, but I do understand why people want that,
Yeah,
because
I get it, but it's we'll now for a while. And again, I'm a short-term pessimist, right? For a while, we'll have now where people, give some bullet points to an AI, which turns it into a text, which is then sent to somebody who turns it into a summary with AI, and then reads the summary, and you'll get this sort of huge loss of information. Writing is
yeah,
thinking,
exactly.
and AI doesn't think. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't deal well with facts, so you can't. Well, that's probably going to improve, but you can't use AI for transferring facts very well. And the other reason for reading anything is because it's somebody's opinion or insight, and AI doesn't do that either. So right now it's junk, but I do think
I
that,
agree.
this is very temporary.
But I think, yeah, and it's, well, I don't want to go too much into that, but my daughter at school had an assignment this year. She had read a book, and one of the things in for the assignment was generate a bio about the author of the book using ChatGPT, and
Yeah.
then dissect it by these and these questions. What are the things are wrong? And actually, one of the things that was happening with the answer that she got was that the main character of the book was given a different name by ChatGPT. Like, very obvious, completely wrong. But having 16-year-olds making them think that, I love the assignment from the school,
Yeah.
that they actually say, like, okay, you have to do it. You have to copy paste your first answer. You have to show where are all the errors. What do you do to get a better answer, and how do you get that? And that's just like, wow,
Yeah.
that is how you should teach people how to use some of that software,
Yeah, that's
instead of
useful.
saying let's not use it, which what
Yeah.
other teachers were saying.
If you say that, some people will use it, and they will either be at an advantage or a disadvantage compared to the others, and you might not know. But if you integrate it, then you can at least
Exactly.
get the conversation about it started, even if it's like it's going to be different in a few years anyway. But
But yeah,
you can't wait for
okay.
it to be finished.
Then I think that's typically when we are in a whole innovative place where things are moving, and, like you say, much faster than ever before.
Yeah.
Let's move to that next question. What's a book you have read? And I know that you had two books that you wanted to talk, that I think have a little bit of things in common.
Yeah, they're
if I
both.
remember.
So yeah, I started doing improv theater last year,
Wow.
which it's a lot of fun. I've been exposed to it like a long time ago. I would go to in Ghent, go see improv theater when I was a student. I
The
always think
comedy
like,
club,
oh,
or was
yeah,
it?
in the Bal Infernal, and I always was thinking like, oh, this looks like a lot of fun. I should do this, but I was also like, no, I'm studying music. That's that's
That's
my life.
already enough.
That's enough. But then I went to the Edinburgh Fringe and saw some really good improv, and I was like, okay, now I'm doing it. And most of what you see and most like on TV or whatever is this very short form, right? Where they try to get to the laugh as quick as possible, and then anything is allowed, and it's fine. It can be a lot of fun. But I'm really interested in sort of the more long form improv comedy or improv theater, whatever you want to call it, where it's really like building stories and real stories with real characters that have emotional range and a
Wow.
history and a background and
But
relationships.
all invented on the spot.
Yes.
Wow.
And it's it's challenging, of course, and I'm definitely not at that level yet that I could do like a 1 hour show that would keep you entertained. But there's a lot of sort of interesting like technique and even like schools of thought there and different philosophies, which is very interesting. And the one I'm sort of most attracted to is that also the title of one of those books. It's Truth in Comedy. And I put the other book there as well, the Improv
I think
Handbook.
I think that's the one that you wanted.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Truth in Comedy, right?
Yes, that's one of the classics, and but there's a bunch of books, and I'm still like working my way through it. But there's a quote in one of the books from George Bernard Shaw, which is, I want to be moved to laugh. I don't want to be tickled to laugh." And so I really like that. It's like in Truth and Comedy as well, right? The idea is that if you can tell a story that is true, right? Not factually true or anything, right? It's all invented, and it can be like two aliens having brunch in a volcano. It's not real, but do they have like a real relationship and actual characters and emotions and backgrounds, and then the idea is that the truth, when told truthfully, is funny enough as it is, right? The comedy will come from things where we relate to it and really so that's what I'm really interested in at the moment, and that's sort of the thing that my spare time goes to. Um, and
And
like,
again, we talked about being in the agile space, having people who are musicians. I actually know also a couple of people who have been into improv. I've seen improv sessions also at agile conferences, because
yeah,
it helps us to think on our feet. It helps us also to look at different realities, because I've never done improv, but I've done a couple of these workshops at conferences, and it's like you think you want to take it in one direction and somebody else moves it in a completely different direction, and so your reality has shifted like on the spot.
yeah.
And yeah, that's
But and again, nothing against it. But you do encounter, when I go to classes and things, you do encounter people who, oh, I do this to improve my public speaking, or because I'm a writer and to help think, or I met stand-up comedians, of course, that's an obviously, or people for social skills, or somebody even said like, this helps me improve my dating because I never run out of stuff to say. And that's all fine.
okay.
And back when I was a choir conductor, we would have people who came in and said, "Yeah, my therapist told me I should do something like this," and that's all fine, right? They're like, yes, this will
You
give
do
you all
you,
kinds
yeah.
of skills, but for me, I very quickly sort of decided, no, I'm just doing this for the sheer joy of
Of doing
of creating something together, and hopefully moving someone to feel something, or to just escape from reality for a moment there, or just the joy of you know creating together something like that. When no If it has any therapeutic benefits, or all fine, but sometimes you just want to do something for the inherent beauty of the thing.
Exactly. That I definitely understand that. I want to move to that next question, and that's the one that you also told me before. Like, I have no idea where that might go, but what's the question that you think I should also ask you, and what's the answer?
Yeah, and I told you that it's a bit of a dark question, but it's been on my mind sometimes, especially when I'm writing with Rebecca. All this effort we do in trying to get people to do better software design, is there a point to this, right? Because
Mm.
it's like, bringing water to the sea. Uh, no, that's probably the wrong metaphor. It's like a drop on a hot plate. That's the one I'm looking for. Uh,
Mm.
where
It's a different kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the our industry programmers and all that, it doubles every 5 years or whatever the number is. That means that half the people, probably even more because people leave, but half the people building our systems have less than 5 years experience. They are not and cannot be worried about the intricacies of advanced design or modeling. They're just trying to get the thing to work, right? And to the skills that you need. It moves so fast. There's so much stuff. Since the start of this meeting, 5 new JavaScript frameworks have been released, probably. So, um, is there a
All
point to
written
that?
by ChatGPT.
Yeah, and there's never money to do it well. There's only money to do it over, and then people do it for the sake. So sometimes we worry, right, that there's no point to it. But also, like, one of the things I really learned, I would say the hard way, and especially writing with Rebecca, is, who am I writing this for? And my answer has, over the last couple of years, really become, I'm writing this for the version of myself of maybe a week ago or 10 years ago, but who knew what I know now, except that one thing that I'm writing about. And
Mm.
that kind of person would be hopefully thrilled to read that, and would get some insights, and would maybe go make a change, or have some impact on other people. Or um, so for a lot of it, I've sort of abandoned that I should try to change everyone. But if you can impact something in a small way somewhere, you never know. That's like the next Eric Evans or Martin Fowler, or
And like you say,
Newton or
and,
Darwin or Einstein. Who knows?
yeah, but also and also you, because that's what I heard. It's like not just the other people, but also you, because by writing it, that's how I understood. Maybe I'm wrong, but you also have a better understanding of some of these concepts than you have before you started writing.
Yeah, writing is thinking, right?
Mhm.
It's only after I've written it very often that or well, not necessarily written, but explained to people, or that's when you have to structure it in your head in a way that you are forced to understand it and sort of. And that's just, by the way, like another thing that I learned with Rebecca. We were doing some research for one of our essays, and we read some books and other stuff. And I said she has taught me to write again. She has also taught me to read again,
Mm.
because we are like, when we do that, we're reading other people's writing and scrutinizing that, and okay, where is this coming from? What do they really mean? They reference something here. Let's go back to the place where they are referencing. Are they saying the same thing here? And it turns out it
In
can be
many
very
cases,
scary
not.
that a lot of books are just really sloppy, where they say something and then a whole bit later they sort of develop the idea, but it's not really the same thing they're saying, and it doesn't match anymore. And and it's normal. It's very hard to write a long, consistent thing. Um, but even like things that I would consider evil, like quoting something out of context and even modifying the quote from the original book,
Yeah,
people
the
do these things.
I don't know if you know the book from Laurent Bossavit, who wrote a book, "The Le Prochance of Software Engineering."
Yeah,
How yeah, he looks into some of the concepts of where they're coming from, and then people think, yeah, this has been proven, and then when he finds the original thing, it's like somebody who wrote something like, I'm not sure, but it's probably something like that. But then 5 books later, everybody says this person said that and he has proven it and whatever. Like,
yeah.
no, that never happened. But somehow we all start to believe in some of these
There's
things.
an XKCD comic where I think the gist of it, somebody writes something on Wikipedia and another editor adds a citation needed. And then some lazy journalist copies that line uh, from Wikipedia and puts it in some article. And then somebody
And
comes back to add the citation to that article.
yeah, and so this is how legends are born, or urban legends are born, and other kind of things.
But I'm also more like, how to put it, I've become more acceptant of these things, because it's all very human, right? There is
Mm.
um, we should be looking for things that, again, the truth in comedy, right? The things that are true, even if they're not true, but we can't have everything scientifically accurate. There's always this space of things where we can't do science, or can't do science yet, or it's too expensive, and we can only rely on sort of opinion forming and intuition building, and that's something where I was like a lot more strict in when I was younger and more naive. Now I think it's an essential aspect of how we evolve to be comfortable with the sort of uncertain, messy, ill-defined, chaotic things, and new science will come from that over time. But we need
I,
we
I
need.
I agree, but I think indeed it's somewhere because, well, it takes a long time to what you just said about what you're doing with Rebecca, finding out the source and then trying to understand what is a person meaning, and trying to see what are the citations, which is valuable for many things, and sometimes it might just be taking too long, and yeah, and then people might not do that, but that might still inspire someone else to do something else in a way that then be proven correct or not. But it sometimes it's also dangerous, like what Laurent wrote. Like, yeah, many people now saying this is what we need to do, and it's actually never been proven.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, in science, we do have some examples where, yeah, people either mix up their experiments or fake it or whatever, and that's yeah, that's the
yeah.
kind of world that we're living in.
Yeah,
Um,
and there's in every domain, right? And the most hype domains like AI are going to attract the most bullshitters. But we can't, like, the way I think about it is, we can't wait for the science to do things and to move forward. That's too
mhm.
slow. There's things where we have to just try things and act and work based on sloppy hypothesis, but to move it forward. And I think that's I think I underestimated that when I sort of started in software. I had this, as I mentioned, right, this sort of very linear view of problem statement and solution and verifying if it works and move on to the next one. Design doesn't work that way. Design is you build a solution, and then that teaches you something about the actual problem, but you're also already moving on to the next thing, and then hopefully you get some opportunity to go back on some of your design decisions and evolve them, and, and have some of the discipline at least to go back, which is of course a core idea in agile that very few agilists actually do. A lot of it is incremental instead of iterative, as you know, of course.
Yeah, but I think it is important that people do realize that we need to go back and need to learn and dare and again go back to what you said before, maybe even throw stuff away that is no longer true, and yeah, it's I see a lot of that people are struggling with that. So yeah.
Yeah, but all good design comes from that, because, well, you could be very lucky and your first design is the perfect design, but we can't define the problem accurately, so we can't even evaluate if a design is the perfect design, because we can't formulate the problem in the sort of mathematical language. So the only way is to design and learn and put your design in production and learn from that and keep evolving it. And that's what people who are not designers underestimate, especially. But we let them call the shots, and then we complain that we don't get to do this sort of design, and it's sort of a vicious circle, of course.
Yeah, and or the thing is also what you said about not knowing the exact. If you have a perfect design from the first time, you wouldn't even know it, and so yeah, if you would stop it, and so even if you would indeed do some of the repetitions and whatever, try other designs, at least after a couple of them, you might know, okay, this is the best. Just like with interviews, you might do an interview with a person, and the very first person that you're interviewing might be the best, but at least you need to talk to two or three more before you know, like, oh, this is actually the level that I'm looking for.
And design and management are two very different modes, which I was talking about earlier, about this sort of running a company and doing the work that I actually love to do, which is a design work, that it's conflicting. So the answer is not let's put all the designers in charge. People have tried that as well, and also it doesn't work. I think it's just inherent to the nature of everything we try to achieve in software or elsewhere, where it's going to have this sort of conflict between design and management and the people who pay for it as well. So investment in those things. It will never fully understand each other. It's sort of an uneasy marriage, but still we have built everything we have built in the world. And my favorite example right now, I'll just say this, of why I am a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist is, yes, we have a lot of wars going on right now, but at the same time, immediately when a war starts, 8 initiatives start, right? Humanitarian aid. That idea, right? Humanitarian aid during a war, that didn't exist for the first 4 billion years of this planet, right? And now that concept exists, and even if things go worse in the short term, that's something that doesn't have to be reinvented. That exists, right? That's out there now, and even if all humanitarian aid efforts stop now, there's a seed there that can restart faster and better. Hopefully,
I like that, because again, we're becoming more human, and the fact that we react so harsh when that aid is not allowed into a country or other kind of things shows us that as a human species we have evolved, because I can imagine that I don't know, thousands of years ago, that would not be even been considered the thing to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
And,
exactly.
and so yeah,
So that's why I think we have a great potential as a species.
that's a nice way. Well, and I want to move to that next question because we're already talking for a very long time.
Yeah.
Who do you think I should ask next? And I know that you have a large list of people that you wanted to invite.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah. Well,
let's take
obviously,
the time.
yeah, my co-author Rebecca Wersbrock would be a good idea, of course.
She
But
was number 2 on the show already, so she's been
yeah,
here.
I imagined you already had her. But in terms of new voices, Xin Yao is somebody I met at DD Europe and in a training class of mine. But
I think is that her? I'm not sure.
yes, that's her. She's like I learn from her every time. She's so brilliant. She knows so many things. She sort of approaches software design and operations and all of that from like a very both hands-on plus also a very sort of high level and the philosophy and everything behind it. It's just spectacular. I was very happy to convince her to speak at DD Europe, and she's been speaking everywhere lately. And another person is my colleague Hien Verschatse, who is finishing a book on collaborative software design. So she put a lot of thought in how we can improve this, and
that's her, right?
And that's her, yes. She's working on another book as well with Feline Hermans. But yeah, it's incredible to have somebody like that who puts in sort of a lot more of the effort in thinking about how we can do this and do this together than I have been able to do. So yeah, it's just I'm very lucky to be surrounded by people like that.
I think you still had a couple of names. Do you want to still mention something, people? Or
I forgot which ones I sent to you.
I can show you some pictures, and I hope then that I have the right person.
Yes, that's Lizzie Hocke. Yeah, she's also very very interesting. She talks about testing and security and testing for security and all that, and sort of finding the heuristics for it and how to reason about that and all that. I don't know her very well, but every time I meet her at a conference, it's very fascinating.
Well, this might be a moment to learn more if I invite her and then she talks some more.
Yeah, you should.
And then there is this person still.
That's Cyril Martrer. Yeah, he's more of an established name, I would say, in the DDD space. I've learned a lot from him as well. He's been in it longer than I have. He wrote a book called Living Documentation, which is sort of all these. It's sort of based in the ideas of domain-driven design, but then focused on documentation and specifically on documenting in a way that it's not sort of very static, some page that somebody wrote, but patterns for doing that like evolving the documentation and then, for example, using annotations in code and then generating the actual text from that and things like that.
Yeah, many really interesting concept because the one thing I've learned in school is that there's only one thing worse than no documentation, that it's outdated documentation. Because if whatever, if it's comment or something else, but if it's wrong, somehow we are wired to believe what's written there, and even if we have the code next to it that says that it's something completely different, I don't know, our brains, or at least my brain, was wired to live and really believe that documentation, and so having it in a much smarter way is so needed in this world. And it's interesting that after all these years, still a lot of people don't know these concepts and all these things.
Well, maybe that's one of the areas where AI in the short term could offer a lot of improvement, explain the thing to us.
Well, we and in our company in Excelate, we have built, or we're using an AI that is actually reading our documentation, so people can actually ask questions and get answers but it's based on pre-selected documentation from us. It's not just anything. It's
So I mean
revisited.
interpreting the code and trying to like reverse
Even
engineer what the code is for. That might
yeah,
be
that's
an
even
interesting
a
area.
step further. That's
Yeah.
we're not
But
there yet.
that might be achievable in the short term, maybe. I don't know.
Let's
But to go back to Cyril, like the most fascinating thing about him for me is that it's one of those people who can really talk about modeling and domain modeling and these things in a very sort of deep sense, like seeing the patterns. Like I run a conference on software modeling and design, and a lot of the topics we get are sort of, because those are two very, very hard topics to talk about. And a lot of what we get is surrounding modeling and design. Like how can we, model better together, or what techniques are there, or but he talks about the actual modeling and the actual sort of patterns and ways of thinking about it that I find very inspiring and fascinating.
Indeed.
So
And you had
well,
one more person that I think let's add one more.
yes, that's Indu Alagarsami. She works for the New York Times. Yeah, also one of those people who sort of looks very much across boundaries, and like some of her recent work has been in finding like basically looking at techniques we have in software design and modeling, but bridging that with what exists in the user experience space, where they are from a completely different angle approaching some of the, or coming to some of the same conclusions maybe, but using entirely different techniques and language. So I find that very interesting, how she's like looking at both and finding the maybe the opportunities to learn from each other. So yeah, very much she's like I don't know what her title is, but senior architect or something like that at the New York Times.
I think principal engineer, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
when I looked it up originally.
But titles are,
Yeah, exactly. Titles. Well, I've recently discovered that, or at least I have the feeling that in Belgium, a lot of us, we care less about titles. But sometimes when you work with people from different cultures, they care much more about titles than at least
Well,
I and some of my colleagues do.
they have great value for like communicating to people who don't know what you do, and to indicate sort of what sort of things they can talk to you about. And of course, they're useful for finding your next job. So it's like one of those things where they have uses in some area and they are pointless in others. And if you don't have those problems, then you don't see the value of titles. But the titles are often sort of like, why is she called principal engineer and not architect? Maybe because some people felt there that they don't need architects at some point, or the term architect got a bit burned or whatever, right? And then people come up with YouTube. Like I had a client where they said, oh, we don't need architects. And then they invented a role called Pathfinder, which was really architects. And then nobody understood what a Pathfinder was. So they got rid of all the Pathfinders, and now they have no architects. And then it became a mess. And then they started having architects again. So titles have their uses, but their downsides. Let's just...
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, and that's a little bit what I wanted to say, is like, I didn't see much value, but I do understand that many other people do see value, and that is as valuable or even more valuable than my opinion, because of the biases that I might have. Now, Matthias, it's been really great conversation. I really want to thank you. For the people that want to reach out to you, what would be a good way to connect with you?
Well, either through artling.eu, so my company. I'm Mathias Verraes on Twitter and Mastodon and Blue Sky and LinkedIn, although I'm because it's so spread out now, I'm not much on any of those anymore. But I'm reachable there, and then my blog and my book are all on verraes.net.
And that's the one I did prepare.
So yeah, if you go there, you can find all the others as well. So
That's what I was thinking about people.
Exactly.
That's the way how people think. So yeah, it's been a wonderful time. I will
For having
it's
me.
and I think while we were talking, I see a lot more sun now than when we started talking. So I'm going to send you off to enjoy some more or do whatever you want to do. But thanks for your time, because it was been
Thanks
a
for
really
having me. This was a lot of fun. And
Same
good
for me.
luck with the podcast.
Thank you for watching Who's Agile, where the stories of agilists come to life. I hope you liked today's interview. Subscribe if you're not subscribed and want to get to know other agilists.